Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Crypto Hipster Podcast. This is your host, Jamil Hassan, the Crypto Hipster, where I bring you entrepreneurs, founders, executives, co-founders, thought leaders, you name it, all over the world of crypto and blockchain. And today I have another amazing guest, and I'm excited about this interview. He is in the growth area of CrossFi. His name is Phillip Alexeev. Philip, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Really excited to be here.
You're very welcome. Very welcome. So let's kick things off and ask you first, what is your background, and is it a logical background for what you're doing now?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess throughout my whole career, I really, when people ask me what I do, I tell them I do growth for emerging industries, right? And so my whole career has really been focused on what are the new technologies, how are they impacting folks, and what can I do to really help those, proliferate into society and become game changers. And so right out of college, basically started a digital marketing agency right around the time that Twitter was actually launched. And so, very early to that game, scaled the company up to about 30 people worldwide. So I was doing the whole distributed work before it became cool. And then basically ever since then have kind of been, looking at what are the trends that are emerging, and how can I sort of align myself with companies that are changing the game. So, I've run the gamut from everything from 3D printing to augmented reality, virtual reality to crypto and sort of so on and so forth. And so basically, where I got my start in crypto, I was actually working with a company called Sketchfab, which is in the AR VR space, and they got acquired by Epic Games. So it was a really great opportunity to kind of from zero to 1,000, so to speak, kind of watch the growth of that whole industry and how it evolved and sort of all the key players in it, sort of aligning to create an industry that I would say is pretty commonplace today. And everybody's got a VR headset laying around somewhere, whether they're using it or not using it. But I watched that industry evolve from the Google Cardboard, right? The first, most people might not even know what I'm talking about, but it was literally a cardboard headset that you would stick your phone into, and it let you kind of like have the first VR experience. And so when I was working at Sketchfab, got just really interested and started hearing a lot about Ethereum, Bitcoin, and just kind of like that whole ecosystem. So started doing a lot of research and figuring out what is this stuff all about? How is it actually impacting the world? How is it going to be a game changer? That's the first thing I ask myself when I hear about new tech is this going to be a game changer, and how is this going to be a game changer? So I sort of caught the bug, right? Early investor in Ethereum and Bitcoin, kind of immersed myself in the ecosystem, which actually led me to work on a couple of really cool things. So worked very early consulting a company called Decentraland, which some folks might have heard of. And that was really interesting to immerse myself really in kind of like the intersection between AR, VR, and crypto. And then from there, I went on to work with a company called CoinList, which basically led me down a series of projects to ultimately becoming the head of growth for special projects at a company called Binance, which I'm sure some folks are pretty familiar with. And so, I spent some time at Binance, and I think it was just a really interesting journey watching kind of DeFi as a whole evolve, and being a major part in sort of watching the growth of that industry. And then after I left Binance, I was kind of thinking about, well, what is something that I can work on that aligns with my current ethos of, leaving the world a better place than when I entered it, and I feel like a lot of people say that, but I try to put my money where my mouth is and sort of try to, work on technologies that do actually enable that ethos. And so I was actually one of the founding members of a company called SAS Mining, which does eco-friendly Bitcoin hosted mining. And so effectively using renewable energy sources to mine Bitcoin for folks that don't have the infrastructure to mine at home, don't have the technical capacity to mine. So, basically hosting Bitcoin miners for folks. And so, that was really I would say my first foray into technologies that impact the civilization in a way that, really improves the world, so to speak. And so, SAS mining is a carbon neutral mining technology. When you talk about Bitcoin mining, people always say, hey, it sucks for the environment. And, I say, okay, cool. But there are companies out there that are sort of changing that narrative. And so, yeah, SAS mining is carbon neutral, hoping to become carbon negative at a certain point. But so worked with SAS mining for quite some time to launch some facilities and really build the business from the ground up, before there was ever any facilities and before we ever had any miners running. It was really just a wait list of folks that were interested to launch some miners in an eco-friendly way. And we've managed to build that up to a facility in Wisconsin running on hydropower, as well as a facility in Paraguay that's also running on hydropower. And we were covered in, all kinds of big publications, Decrypts, Forbes, Business Insiders, so on and so forth. And so, kind of moving from SAS mining, having felt like I had completed my mission to really helping them establish a very solid foundation and a customer acquisition engine and sort of how the rest of the business is going to grow, started looking out for, for my next project. What is the next thing that I'm going to be working on, which ultimately now landed me at CrossFi. And so aligned forces with CrossFi and started running growth here, and really excited about the technology that they're working on and ultimately how it's going to impact the world, and hoping to make it a part of my mission to make the world a better place through tech.
Sounds really cool. Um, I have to have a follow up on that before I get into CrossFi
Sure.
because you work in Binance, and Binance is in the news this week. Um, CZ, former or founder of Binance, got four months in
Yep.
prison. Um, what are your thoughts on that? There's a lot of people who are upset. He only got 4 months. I think it's too much. I think you shouldn't have got anything. What are your like how are your thoughts on how that should have played out or will play out?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think on many fronts, it's a relatively complicated question, especially given my background, especially given sort of me being privy to the world of crypto for, the last 6 or so years. And I think my personal opinion is that I also agree. I don't think that anybody should have gotten jail time necessarily, especially somebody that's I wouldn't classify CZ as a criminal, so to speak. It doesn't feel like it feels very symbolic, right? It feels like they needed to really put a statement out there to really show the world that nobody's untouchable, to show them that even the most powerful people in the world that align with world leaders and sort of create, game-changing businesses are still subject to regulation. And so I think, with that sentencing, they've definitely proven their point, and I think people are definitely going to think twice before they kind of mess around with government policies and regulations. But I think ultimately, where I truly think it's unfair is that regulations were so unclear and it was all such a gray area, up until even now, right? Like I think there's a lot more clarity around regulations, but I think it was such a gray area that anybody operating in the space was sort of trying their best to build businesses that, had a sustainable impact. And sometimes, yes, like there were things that were done that were somewhat questionable, but anybody building a business does things that are somewhat questionable. The biggest businesses in the world, Facebook, Google, Twitter, like there's a myriad of lawsuits and tales of crazy things that have gone on behind the scenes to help build the companies into what they are today, which are, the darlings of the entire tech industry. And so, taking a businessman who just on all accounts seems like a decent guy, and from personal experience is a pretty decent guy, and putting him behind bars, it's definitely a way to send a message, but I'm not sure if that was necessarily what was the appropriate course of action. I think, a heavy fine, I think setting some regulatory standards, I think setting a precedent of, the fact that people will ultimately still pay the price for kind of operating in a gray area, but putting somebody like that behind bars doesn't actually, I think, have any meaningful impact on improving the world, improving the crypto industry, improving the finance industry. I think, and as compared to, and I will take it there, as compared to some of the things that have gone on in TradFi and Wall Street, man, like some of those people totally deserve to be in jail if they're putting somebody like CZ behind bars. So, I just I don't necessarily agree with the sentence, but I do see how it's basically a stepping stone to clearer regulations, to more clarity around what is and isn't sort of legit and kosher in the world of crypto. And I think stemming out of this, we as a whole, as an industry, are going to get ultimately a lot more clarity around how we can operate and where we can operate and what we can and what we can't do. So yeah, definitely a complicated topic, but I, like you, like many other people, was super surprised to see somebody actually get jail time for something like that.
Yeah, I would love to see, cleaner regulations. That'd be
Yeah.
great. So we know what we're moving into. So thank you. CrossFi. I want to talk about CrossFi. What is it all about, and what makes you a game-changing player with eliminating financial isolation globally?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I guess to start, CrossFi it's an ecosystem and it's got multiple pillars. I think, foundationally, it's a layer one blockchain that was built to support scalable payment solutions. Aside from the blockchain, obviously, there's a whole suite of kind of your standard DeFi apps, that are very familiar to folks that are in the crypto space, allowing you to kind of operate, within the crypto ecosystem in an efficient way. And I think the most interesting and probably for me the most important aspect of CrossFi is our flagship app, which is basically an app that allows folks to non-custodially transact with crypto through either physical or virtual cards at any point of sales terminal throughout the entire world. And so basically, you can think of it as you have crypto in your MetaMask wallet, you connect your MetaMask wallet to the CrossFi app. Tell the CrossFi app, this is how much of my crypto that you can access. And then through CrossFi, you generate either a virtual card or order a physical card that allows you to then directly spend your crypto anywhere that you can spend with a Visa or a MasterCard or an Amex.
I like it. I go to these. My son's in regattas now. He's racing, and they have all kinds of merchandise there. And I see, ask the guys if I can buy merchandise, and they go, "Oh, I take everything except Bitcoin." I'm like, "You should." Oh, so this seems like a way that they could do that. So
Absolutely. And I think, there are some solutions which claim to be similar, but I think the big differentiator between CrossFi and some of those other competitive solutions are pretty much the entirety of the competition is custodial. So you actually have to transfer your crypto over to somewhere, almost like in an escrow account. So you're no longer responsible for your keys. You're no longer holding your crypto. You're leaving it subject to whatever vulnerabilities these platforms have. Then the other part of it is a lot of these competitors are basically using third-party banking partners, and so companies that have relationships with banks that basically enable them to go through them to, kind of facilitate transactions, whereas CrossFi actually has direct relationships with the banking industry. And I think most importantly, CrossFi works on the blockchain. Everything is on the blockchain. All payments, all transactions, everything is actually operating through smart contracts on the blockchain, which is another huge differentiator from some of these other, potential competitors. So I would say CrossFi is really, the main mission of it is bridging the gap between Web3 and traditional finance and becoming an alternative to basically traditional banking, right?
I like it. Um, the other week I went to last weekend, not this past weekend, the weekend before I went to New York to buy a present for my wife for her birthday.
Mhm.
And my crypto was in PayPal, but PayPal on that day was not working. You know,
Surprise.
yeah, surprised. So I had to pay with a credit card, and then I took when PayPal was working. Then I took the money, put it in my bank, and then paid the credit card. Right? If I could remove all those steps and just pay directly, that would be a huge benefit. Um,
Absolutely. It saves you time, it saves you fees, it saves you operational inefficiencies. I mean, there's so many steps that you need to take to be able to spend your crypto in the real world. And, that's for us lucky enough to be in first world countries where, we even have the convenience of having a bank account. And then when you think about the majority of the world's population that's unbanked, like crypto truly serves as a banking solution for a lot of folks, and the way that they transact in their daily lives are through crypto wallets. And so being able to enable some of those folks to truly be able to transact the way that we can transact in first world countries is, I think a huge game changer for the industry. And I think ultimately, there's a lot of demand for something like that.
awesome. So I want to talk about your role as growth. Actually, overall growth. We're talking about growth marketing all overall. What's I hear that term a lot, right? What is it all about, and how has it been effective in helping blockchain protocols platforms?
Yeah, absolutely. So I like to, kind of like I'll give an in a nutshell definition and then zoom a little bit deeper and then we can kind of go more granular. So growth marketing ultimately is about taking companies and making them easier to do business with. And so what does that truly mean? So, when you look at a company, any company to me, at least, in my mind, I've given my decade plus of experience in growth marketing, a company to me is a funnel. It is the moment that somebody finds out about a technology to the point that somebody uses the technology to the point that somebody actually starts telling their friends about the technology and how it's been a game changer in their lives and why their friends should start using it. And so, the way that I look at the funnel is just a series of touch points, from, basically awareness all the way down to referral, ultimately, where a customer interacts with a company and tries to figure out a way to make a technology that sounds like it could work for them work for them. And so, what I do as a growth marketer is, I work with companies to first and foremost determine what are those touch points? How are you spreading the word about your company? How are you interacting and presenting yourself to first time users? How are you onboarding users into your product? How are you enabling them to get a benefit out of your product? And then ultimately, users that have gotten the benefit out of your product, how are you then enabling them to then go out and spread the word and sort of create this recurring loop, and to, kind of how do you make that loop as efficient as possible? And in growth marketing, we have this term, it's called the aha moment. So it's the moment that a user realizes that they've gotten value out of a product. And so as a growth marketer, one of my main jobs, I would say, is how do I get an unaware user to the aha moment as quickly and efficiently as possible while curating the best possible experience for them such that, they basically derive pleasure out of it. And so I would compare this almost to, you're throwing a house party. You go out into the street, you're telling people, hey, giving out flyers, I'm throwing a house party, I'm throwing a house party. People come to the house party, they arrive at your door, you open the door. What does the room look like? Is it set up for a party? Are there disco balls? Are there lights? Is there music? Is there a DJ? Are there drinks? Or is it just an empty room that, looks very, gets people very skeptical? And then you're basically taking folks by the hand and walking them through, giving them the tour of the house, showing them where all the things that they need are so they can be as comfortable as possible at this party, such that ultimately at the end of the night, they say, wow, that was one of the best nights of my life. I had such a great time. Next time you're throwing a party, I'm bringing all of my friends. And so that, kind of in a nutshell is growth marketing. And ultimately, growth marketing as an umbrella truly works for any industry, right? Like I said, I've operated in 3D printing, I've operated in AR, VR, and ultimately in the crypto space, it's the same exact thing. How do you make sure people are aware of the solution? How do you make sure people derive value from that solution as quickly as possible? And how do you enable people to then go out and spread the word about that solution and then get more folks into that growth loop?
I like the party analogy. I understand it now. Thank you.
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
so I have a question about, and I don't understand you. I'm going to ask you more. You said we're going to get into more granularity. My next question is this: why should growth marketers avoid the low feeding fruit, right,
Mhm.
of tapping into user greed during bull markets? And so, what is the low feeding fruit, and why should you avoid uh, using greed as a way to market?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess the best way to answer that is to sort of separate the crypto industry into two buckets, right? So I segment the crypto industry by here's a company that is saying that they're building a solution for something, but ultimately is just a cash grab. How do you get people enticed to pump the price of a token and, sort of get a quick win, and then ultimately the technology never gets built or it gets built in a half-assed way and ultimately doesn't deliver value? Then you kind of have the other side of the coin, which is companies that are building real scalable technologies that are solving real problems that have applications in the real world that also then kind of, they do have their native tokens that reflect the value of what those companies are bringing into the real world. And so, I would say first and foremost, the former kind of companies, they're all low feeding fruit, right? Anybody that's building a company just to pump the price of a token and sort of, walk away with investor dollars is, I would say that's just not it's not a world that I'm just into operating in. And, I don't ever judge people for doing what they do and doing what they think is right. But I think ultimately that's just like one way to operate. And now the other way to operate is even some companies that are building legitimate products that are going to potentially revolutionize the way that things are done in the real world. I think it's very easy, especially in financial markets, to capitalize on greed. I think, everybody wants to make a quick buck. Everybody wants some sort of monetary reward. Companies are trying to compete with decreasing attention spans by offering incentives for people to sign up and, complete actions on their platform and sort of like stimulate engagement. But ultimately, and I've seen this play out in every industry I've ever been in over the last decade, operating from a place of stimulating and incentivizing greed is never a sustainable business model. The types of users and the types of customers that you bring onto your platforms by rewarding sort of greedy instincts are not the types of customers that are actually interested in your product. They're not the types of customers that are going to stay around. They're not the types of people that are going to bring value to an ecosystem. They're really looking to serve themselves in the short term and ultimately are just not, you know, again, it's one thing to pump your numbers and show exponential rocket ship growth, and all of those things are great in the short term. But I think if you're building a long-term sustainable business and trying to have real impact, that's just not the type of community that's going to stick around in a product. And so, you know, everything from as basic as just like massively incentivized referral engines to trying to give away tons of tokens for folks to come onto a platform to and any of those types of tactics, like I would say, they're applicable to some extent, but really that's not the growth trajectory that a real long-term sustainable business is going to operate on. And so, there's been, I think, referral programs were just such a hot topic, like Dropbox and PayPal, and like a lot of these companies grew through referrals. But there's been a lot of research done ultimately on, companies that have built a foundation on that and the types of users that are brought in through those channels versus other channels. And those are the users that tend to have the lowest lifetime values that don't tend to stick around for long periods of time and just ultimately aren't good contributors to the ecosystem. They don't even really use the products ultimately. They just come in, get what they wanted, and leave. And so, as a growth marketer, especially somebody who tries to think long term and tries to think sustainable, it's just not the approach that I usually tend to take. And I think, things like giveaways and airdrops and incentivized referrals, they all have their place as part of a, sort of diversified marketing mix. Everything that's working is worth testing, but I think ultimately relying on things like that is the downfall of many businesses. And ultimately, unless there's another scalable, predictable acquisition channel that powers a business, it's just hard to build something long term on that. And so that's why I personally tend to avoid leaning too heavily on things like that. And I think companies that tend to follow that same philosophy just tend to stick around a little bit longer and do better in the long run.
I agree with you 100%. Um, yeah, I used to work at AIG. My first job there was I would partner with, I was a database guy and built the reporting department, and I would partner with the RFP team, and we do RFP packages for clients to build sustainability. So I get it. So, along with those first batch that you mentioned, and I'm gonna use the word meme because some of them are,
Sure. Yep.
there are additional negative associations, Congress, of crypto, enabling illicit activity, Senator Warren. I would say that they engage in illicit activity by misleading the public, but what's your definition of illicit activity?
Yeah, illicit activity, again, it's another gray area topic. I feel like everybody's got a little bit of a different barometer, everything from being straight up illegal all the way down to something being slightly misleading, and sort of either tricking or confusing folks. But, I look at illicit activity as something that I would stay away from. And I think it's the same for everybody, right? Like when you think about the word illicit, even people that are doing illegal things might not consider what they're doing illicit. Maybe they sort of justify it to themselves and say, "Hey, this is what I need to do to get by and survive." But the way that I think about illicit is, well, first of all, is it legal or illegal? If it's explicitly illegal, definitely falls into the bucket of illicit. But for me personally, like, is it misleading? Is it taking advantage of people? Is it tricking people into doing things? Is it, consciously taking an action that might be looked down on by some folks to ultimately generate profit? And so, there's a lot of conversation about crypto is enabling illegal activity and money laundering and just all of these horrible things. But like, if you really think about it, like some of the biggest banks in the world have been flat out caught enabling money laundering, have been flat out caught enabling folks that are doing terrible things to put their money in these banks and, sort of help them generate profits and move their money around in a way that, sort of flies under the radar. And so, when somebody tells me crypto enables illicit activity, I'm like, well, you must not have done a lot of research on, on some of these, big banks that you sort of blindly trust. Then the other side is, I mean, look at cash. Like cash has been used for such a long time for a multitude of reasons, but some of the most illicit activity in the world is still, operating on cash. And so, before you take a revolutionary technology that could really be a game changer and can be used for good and try to bucket it in with people that are doing bad things, people will always do bad things with every technology that's available. If you look at just the emergence of AI, look at what some folks are doing with AI these days. Everybody's mind immediately goes to the doomsday scenario of, well, this is going to be used for illicit activity. Everything's going to be used for illicit activity. Let's try to find a way to make the world a better place and make sure that there's good coming out of these technologies and actually creating good applications for them. That's the way I feel.
I agree. Um, and I used to have a show called The X Factor. It was a weekly show where I'd update everybody on the news. And there were so many like politicians saying, like illicit activity comments. And I got mad. I was like, I have to stop. I have to stop this show because I'm just coming out as an angry guy, you
Yeah,
know.
absolutely.
And I'm like, how many times has Bitcoin been? They have the Bitcoin. I haven't checked it in a year. The Bitcoin death, comments in the media. It was like
Yeah.
5 years ago. I don't know how many it is now, you know, but it's not dead, you know. Um,
Absolutely. And I think, anything sensational will get attention and people love attention. So, the more crazy sensationalist shit that people say, the more people get stirred up and respond to it. And all of a sudden now you've got engagement built up around that. I look at that as illicit activity, Anybody that's trying to stir up controversy by saying things that they know will get other people mad, like I stay away from that stuff.
yeah, no, I do too now. So we should stay away from that, but we should stay away from, you know, uh, embracing regulations, right? Um, you know, how should we partner with, some organizations to create regulations or help guide them through regulations, or you know, get on the right path for the creation of things that rules that work and
Yeah,
are.
absolutely. I mean, again, I think for me, you can see now my patterns of thought. Like I try to split things into buckets, right? So for me, there's again two buckets of people, three buckets considering there's some people that are just so ignorant they don't care. But then you have one bucket of folks that are so against regulations and they're anarchists and they're gonna run into the fire with a spear and they hate governments and they cool, I feel you, but ultimately like that's a hard way to live life. And ultimately, I think like, trying to go down that path is a path of most resistance with probably very little fruitfulness coming out of it. And then there's the other camp that, will not touch something unless it has 100% clarity and certainty and they feel safe and they know that, they're doing the right thing. And, just look at the cannabis industry. There's people that as soon as it became legalized, they spent their entire lives, 55 years hating it. It's the devil's drug. And now all of a sudden they're like, wow, this is really helpful for my arthritis and I can sleep at night. And oh my God, I can't believe I've never had this in my life before. And so you have those two camps of people that, on one side, people hate regulations and ultimately what they end up with is they are not able to participate in creating those regulations because regulations are coming down the pike regardless. It doesn't matter how much you want to, set everything on fire. There's always going to be governments, there's always going to be regulations, and this is just the world of finance. Wherever there's money, there's attention, and whenever there's attention, there needs to be clarity around it. And so by being so anti-regulatory, you're basically eliminating yourself from the conversations when people are talking about, well, what should we do? What's the right thing to do? Help me understand. Help me immerse myself in this world so that I can actually take that back to the drawing board and say, well, okay, these regulations make sense, and this might be a little bit too harsh, and this is how we create a world in which everybody wins. Crypto companies operate, and then they pay taxes, and then they stimulate the economy, and then it's like a win-win situation. And then there's the folks that are sort of like crypto, illicit activity, illegal activity, regulate everything, kill Bitcoin, it's dangerous for the world. And it's like, well, that to me is also an unfruitful scenario because you're creating a world in which you're not going to have progress. You're really not evolving as a society. And I think the goal of every human being and every civilization should be evolution. Like how can we do something differently? How can we do something better? And unless you're playing the game and unless you're participating, you're just going to miss so many opportunities to improve lives. And so, again, I think there's a beautiful middle ground in which, you don't just roll over and just take what you're given from a regulatory perspective and expect governments and institutions to make the right decisions without your input. But at the same time, you're not just like fighting it every step of the way because if you do, like it's going to come anyway, and then it's going to look way worse because you had no chance to have your inputs on it. And that's why I think like, the crypto industry really needs to align itself with the fact that regulations are coming. Things will change. Like they're as part of a scaling and formalization process of bringing crypto technology to society at scale, we're going to need some sort of guardrails. We're going to need some sort of restrictions, right? You can't just operate in a free-for-all world. We all want to go dancing naked around a fire, but it's just not the reality that we live in. And so, I think embracing regulations as part of something that helps adoption and helps scale is the way that I look at it. And, anytime there's some new proposed regulations, I don't think, oh shit, here we go. Here's the government trying to ruin the good thing. I think, there are people who might not understand the technology as well as they should. And I look at it as my job to help them understand, to enable them to think better and think more clearly and potentially, create a scenario where ultimately it's just better for everyone.
We're almost there, you know. We're almost back in,
Slowly but surely.
I want to say August 2021, where they had those Senate hearings, and we were this close, like, to a law, or like, and it was held up by one Alabama senator, right?
Yeah,
So it's coming, right? So how can we all achieve an inclusive mindset going forward?
exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah, I hope so. So, um,
Fingers crossed all day, every day.
thank you. I want to thank you very much for speaking with me today. I have one last question. Um, it's probably the easiest one I'm going to ask you. Is this: is how can people find out more information about you, about CrossFi? How can they start to use your products and services? How can they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the website is crossfi.org. We've got links to all of our socials, all of our products. You can follow us on all of the, social networks and join our Telegram group and our Discord group and really stay up to date with all the awesome things that we plan on launching throughout the rest of the year. And you could find me as well on socials. I've self-admittedly been pretty heads down, sort of building and just trying to make things happen. But yeah, you can find me. My moniker is Fillionaire. You can find me all over the place under Fillionaire, and yeah, I think there's so much interesting stuff that is coming in the next few months, years. Over the next decade. I mean, the world is going to be a completely different place, and just excited to be a part of it and excited to help facilitate that.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your time today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jamil. Really appreciate that.